I'm Mishal Malik and you're watching India Special. Now, each age and time period is best identified by the culture and art that represents it. This art and culture, of course, comes in various forms, from movies to music to posters and even celebrity icons. But what more does pop culture tell us about the world we live in? And how deeply does it influence the politics we see today? That's our discussion for today's episode. Joining us to explore this is Ali Gulpir, a Pakistani rapper and stand-up comedian. Joining us from Karachi, also joining us today is Paul Krishnamurthy, who's a political analyst, joining us from Manchester. Thank you both for joining us and welcome to the show. Paul, let me begin with you. Now, as I mentioned, under the umbrella of pop culture comes so much, so many things we're seeing today. But let's talk about how powerful pop culture really is. Take us through it. What do you think about this?
In recent years, with the way that it's transformed politics. I think if you went back 10 years ago and you said, could a man like Donald Trump be Prime Minister of America, the President of America? Could Beppe Grillo, the comedian, have such success in Italy? I don't think anyone could have predicted that. And more worryingly, the lesson of the Trump years, and it seems to be spreading everywhere, is that this has become reality. Fakery has become reality. The image and the persona that was created on The Apprentice, for example, that is entirely fake, it's entertainment, that became a real world narrative. It became easier for a fake celebrity to sell their political persona than people who've been in politics for 30 years.
Right. He cashed on it, and many politicians do. But Paul, something interesting you mentioned here is examples from recent years. But I do want to talk about it. Now, you also are saying that it's becoming more manifest in today's world. But we know that ideology and so many political messages, political coding has been happening through pop culture for such a long time. I mean, the Cold War maybe was one of the strongest points in time in which this was, so rampant. But why do you think we're seeing it so much more heightened today?
I actually think there's a kind of a distinction there as well, in that there's one thing sending political messaging through popular culture or ideology, and that indeed has a very long and quite glorious history sometimes. But I think that what's happened now is, because celebrity culture in particular is just so prevalent, it's consumed everything else, and people don't actually know what's real anymore. So if to take the example of Trump has just Trump has enabled the gaslighting of the Western world. People within a couple of years have completely reversed their opinions on lifelong held beliefs.
Right.
And I can only think that's down to the fact that there is so much celebrity culture, there's so much information, it's so fragmented that the audience have lost a concept of what's real and what isn't.
Right. And Ali, you're releasing a lot of new music, and you definitely focus on this aspect of pop culture where you are putting in a lot of satire into your music. You're talking about issues that are widespread in society. Now, why do you think that's a powerful medium?
Well, I think whenever you infuse entertainment with some message, it always works. That's what that to an advantage as well. It's not just about spreading certain negative propaganda. It could be something that you're reflecting about the society. Since we're talking about pop music and pop industry as a whole, I did this song called Kaisa Diya, in which I mocked a morning show host of because there was a host in Pakistan who gave away baby ratings, in a show. He just gave away babies, and that was ridiculous. But so there are these things happening, and people who are watching these things, they don't know the person. They believe the character, right? So there's a certain character everybody's portraying on TV, and people believe that, and then follow whatever they're thinking, and not even speculate that this person could be speaking totally, total nonsense. And so yeah, I think music, pop culture as a whole is greatly affected by the media, and especially because of internet. I believe that celebrity culture, what it was before, and now there's worlds apart, because fans want to know what you're doing on a daily basis. You lose followers if you don't update your Insta stories where you're telling your fans, okay, I'm going to go to the market now, I'm going to go chill with my friends. So it's no longer, it's not just a reality show, it's everywhere. It's
Right.
in our pockets, and we're influenced by it heavily.
How do you feel like that impacts the product at the end of the day? Now, I talk a lot about this on my show. The focus is putting out music or a certain form of art. But now that people are pressurized into having a persona, having a following on social media, that might be completely irrelevant to their work. Do you feel like that changes the end product?
I think it does. I mean, there is certainly a pressure to change and to become more interesting. So obviously, if you have to broadcast your daily life every day, it can't be just like I did nothing. I was sleeping in bed and watching some shows. You can't just broadcast that. So you have to go out and create situations. So that's when the line gets blurred. Because often these, especially the vloggers and nowadays the Instagrammers and the new age of celebrities, I feel like for them they don't even know when it's real life or when it's private life or when it's a shoot or a public vlog, and I feel that that's scary for me, especially for a artist like me. I prefer to keep my private life separately and keep my work separately.
Right.
But I guess there's constant
It seems like
pressure
that's
to
becoming
not
more and more difficult to do if you're in the public. I get your point there. Paul, now, as Ali is talking about this, he's talking about, how it is for celebrities, how it is for anyone who wants to make it in the industry. They need to create a persona. They need to have a following. Now, you were earlier talking about celebrity politicians. And of course, there was this speculation of how this has happened and the fact that this might not be the best thing. You wouldn't have imagined it. But are we trying to talk about something that has happened and then society is reacting to it? Or has society actually created a requirement for politicians and public figures to become and fit into these specific roles and then become celebrity politicians and then, gain that political mileage that they need?
That's a very good question. I think that certainly we have created the culture that has led to Donald Trump and Beppe Grillo and the like. And yeah, I think that we are creating a world now where if you want to run for election, if you want to get your message across, you're going to have millions of followers on Twitter and Facebook, right? Whereas for an up-and-coming politician, the only way they could ever do that is by really doing something outside of the election cycle, appearing on very popular TV shows, etc. You saw with Trump, for example, that Trump entered a race against 17 politicians. And even though he had really nothing of content to add to the whole debate, he won it easily because nobody else, he completely dominated the conversation. He had that many more followers, that many more people likely to promote his tweets or videos on social media. And so, yeah, I think that the obsession with fame has created that demand on people now.
Right, Paul, but with Donald Trump, before him, Barack Obama did this quite well, engaging with pop culture, becoming an icon of sorts. Now, is that how culture is evolving to become? You need to have that personality to be engaging, become relatable with the public. I mean, is that what this situation is about? The public won't elect someone, they won't want someone if they can't relate to them.
I think that's right. I mean, there was a brilliant book written in the 1980s called "Amusing Ourselves to Death," which looked at the prospect of America electing a celebrity, a reality TV star, because the conversation had become so superficial. And of course, at that time, Reagan was president, who was an ex-actor. So I think absolutely that politicians then tailored their legitimate political message, such as Reagan, such as Obama, who do come from a perfectly normal ideological standpoint. And that was where we thought it was going. We thought it was just going that politicians would have to become more media friendly, more celebrity orientated. And then Trump has broken the rules completely, because what Trump has now proved is the content actually doesn't really matter. You know, if you have a big enough celebrity, a big enough voice, and you're able to manipulate social media, then really you can say anything and then change your mind the next day and no one will remember, because they've been so bombarded by information, they're lost.
Right. Now, Ali, you're a great member of society. That's, of course, obvious with your music and your comedy. I really want to get your take on this. When you're seeing all this happen in the world, even in this part of the world, that celebrities are becoming politicians, politicians need to become celebrities to get, elected, need to have power. How do you put that into words? How would you describe the times we're living through right now?
I think what Paul was saying, I can relate that to Pakistan. A few years back, not long ago, our current Prime Minister Imran Khan was called Facebook Prime Minister because he had a lot of Facebook and social media following, but that didn't really result in street power as much. But they built it up, and I believe, and now it's the party in power. It's ruling. It's governing, and it's a practical. It's a real thing. So I believe, even now Hamza Ali Abbasi or anyone else who was a media personality and then went into politics. We see it all around. I don't even think we need to go as far as Trump, where we have such examples here, and so I think it's a reality, and it's gonna get more and more prevalent. I think more and more big names. It's gonna matter, like Paul said. It doesn't matter what you say. It's how loud you can say it. How if you can yell it and you can overdrown everyone else, then that's the truth. It doesn't matter.
Right. Now, just a last question to you before I let you go. Do you feel like pop culture right now gives you more power to express yourself than any other medium, you as an artist?
Definitely. I think especially music is and it's a peaceful way of resolve. And even if you're angry at issues, if you're angry at your lack of freedom or you being censored, anything, it's a way to express that in a healthy way, and way other millions of people who listen to it can relate to it. I feel everyone needs to do that instead of going to streets and breaking things and taking law into their own hands. We just should take it out in the creative expression, and art should never be contained or try to be controlled. Right. So I believe that is one thing that we as Pakistanis need to work on. We need to give more freedom to the artists to exist and to create whatever. Because if true artists create true reflections, only then will become a better society.
Right. On that point, thanks so much, Ali Gulpir, for joining us from Karachi. Now, Paul, going back to you, we're talking about music intersecting with, political expression, your what you want to say, public speech. In all of this, there is an argument to be made that when you conflate art with politics, you miss out on the essence of art, which is to, unite people, to find something that is common between people. And when we're seeing our politics become more polarized, we're seeing it cause more deeper of divides. Do you think this is a good thing that art is also becoming more politicized?
Whether it's good or it's bad, I think it's inevitable. It always has been. I absolutely agree. It has the potential to divide in a way that conventional politics doesn't and conventional art doesn't. I think this is the issue we have right now is that the people who wish to divide humanity and society have worked out how to game this. They have worked out how to shock and excite and anger, and to communicate with this really fragmented audience, and how to use popular culture and art to do so. So that is a massive problem. But at the same time, Ali is right. The only way you can fight this is for the other side to do the same thing. You know, you have to have two artists put in both sides of the. If that's how people want to communicate, how they want to receive their information, then you have to fight on that battleground. You know.
Right. On that point, I'd also like to introduce Giovanna Diomaro, who is a researcher at the University of St. Andrews with special focus on using art in peace building. She's joining us from Warsaw. Thank you so much, Giovanna, for joining us, and welcome to the show. Now, you must have heard a little bit of our discussion, and we're pulling you in at a very interesting time. Give us some insight into, when we're talking about national politics, what is happening in national boundaries, how can pop culture influence international politics?
I think that we can't ignore anymore the role that popular culture has today. This political role that also has this sort of strength and also capacity of attraction amongst young people, who are those who will vote, those who are interested in social and political change, and political culture. Pop and culture speaks to them. Primarily, I think, and it has, of course, an influence that unfortunately I think is still understudied and underrated, I would say. But I think that we can't ignore the role that this kind of culture has every day. I'm not only referring to movies and music, but also, for example, to memes or to the kind of images that appear on social networks and become viral, and then become used more and more in the public and the political discourse. So I definitely believe that.
Giovanna, now, as you're pointing to interrupt there, but you're pointing to something very interesting, the concept of pop culture having the ability to become viral and the influence that has. Now, something that we're seeing very unique to our times is the meme culture. We're seeing more and more political memes come out. And of course, not to discount them being an important form of political communication today. How do you feel, Giovanna, that adds to the political conversation, these memes we see all around us?
I think that there is, first of all, for example, if we talk about these memes who use satire to, I don't know, make fun or to just underline certain political contradictions. Yeah, exactly. From like the one you're just the ones you're just showing now. We can say that there is a sort of, I would say, capacity of attraction, and also the sort of, I would say that this kind of images influence also election turnout. And this has been,
Right. Paul, sorry, Giovanna, let me just jump to Paul quickly and pull him into this conversation. I do want to get his take on this as well. Now, Paul, we see a meme for almost everything nowadays. Do you feel like this aspect almost trivializes very important issues? Do you feel like this thing we have now, turning everything into a joke, is either a way to process things, or do you think it's trivializing matters?
I think it's trivializing, and I think it's a very negative development, because especially with something like politics, where, you know, in any society, the number of people who are seriously engaged in politics is no more than 2 or 3%, right? Now, yet there's a far wider number who at least want to keep basically abreast of developments and to be able to say they are following it. Memes give them this really simplistic, evidence-free answer that they can then say that will, you know, justify their own opinion, that will reinforce their own opinion. And my experience of the meme culture, certainly in American politics and British politics, is it's just made people more and more cynical, more divisive, more divided and less informed. So
Right.
I don't think that's positive.
But Paul, let me just quote the words you stated. I might not have gotten the complete sentence, but I do want to read it out. You said that memes are a very simplistic form that reinforces opinions. Isn't that exactly the essence of popular culture that we're talking about? Isn't that basically memes is the best exemplification of it?
It is the best example of it. I just find it a very depressing development because if you want to understand politics, certainly economics, certainly foreign policy, you're going to have to do some reading. You're not going to get the answers out of one meme. You're going to have to make some effort to investigate the subject. And this to me is how we're seeing opinions turn on their head in 24 hours. You're seeing people who, for example, just to take Trump once again, what's going on in America. Last night on Fox News, Tucker Carlson said, why shouldn't I support Russia against Ukraine? Why would I want to be on Ukraine's side? And this is the United States of America that has been against Vladimir Putin from the outset and against Russia for 100 years. Yet the culture is so short-term and shallow now that one of the top cable channels, one of the top presenters, can just do a total 180 on the position that he and his colleagues have held for like 70 years. And no one will really notice.
Right. I take your point there that there is this lack of expertise, but let's talk about the general opinions. And Giovanna, I want to get your take on this. Now, popular culture, some of what I feel is very powerful about this medium is that it makes ideas, certain ideological aspects, certain concepts accessible, whether in the form of music, movies, or whatever art form you're talking about. Isn't that a good thing? That when people are more able to engage with material. Now, not everyone can engage with material at a very deep theoretical level.
I perfectly agree. Yeah, popular culture, and also, if we talk about music, for example, and the way it spreads around, and the way it also it can also influence people's opinions. But I also think that it goes on the other way around. Like popular culture follows also certain tendency and a certain ways on the way society represents itself. So I would say that if on one way we have this important role of popular culture in influencing opinion and behaviors, I would also say that at the same time it is society itself and social groups that influence the production of certain popular pop culture, products. I think that definitely we can't underestimate the role that popular culture plays in our societies. If we look at also the kind of the way also today politicians, presidents, or candidates to certain elections talk or invest also in their image on Facebook or Twitter, or we can see that there is a certain way of reach out or try to reach out to different kind of audiences that are influenced by certain cultural products. So I think that we should definitely
Giovanna, since I need to go for a break soon, I just want to get Paul's feedback on the discussion we had. Now, Paul, do you have anything to add to the conversation we just had right now in terms of popular culture making certain information accessible and that actually being a good thing?
Absolutely, it's a good thing to make as much information as possible available. And I think, as I say, historically, popular culture has a pretty glorious record of educating people, of engaging people. And it will continue, and the battle will have to be fought on that territory because our populations love popular culture. I think that the big challenge that we have right now, and it's one that we don't appear to be winning, is truth. Right? That's the problem. There's one thing two artists expressing totally contrasting opinions. That's fine, absolutely. That's the nature of art and the nature of politics. But we've actually moved into a world, especially with meme culture, where it's very easy to lie and manipulate.
Right.
And that's our challenge, to defeat that.
Right, I take your point there. Thanks so much, Paul Krishnamurthy, for joining us from Manchester, and Giovanna Diomara for joining us from Warsaw. We're going to go for a short break. When we return, we're going to continue our discussion on popular culture and the influence it has on society as large. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special as we talk about the role pop culture plays on politics and society at large. Now joining us for the discussion is Dr. Taimur Rahman, who's an associate professor at the Lahore University of Management Sciences. He's also an activist and a musician. He joins us from Lahore. Also joining us is Mr. Valerio Bordenaro, advisor to former Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta. He joins us from Rome. Thank you both for joining us and welcome to the show. Dr. Rahman, let me begin with you. Now, we've been talking a lot about the role pop culture is playing these days, how important it is to gain political mileage through becoming engaging with the audience at large. But let's talk on a more academic scape. How valuable has pop culture been in transmitting ideology and ideas to different parts of the world?
I think if we refer to, since we have a friend from Italy, if we refer to the work of Antonio Gramsci, his path-breaking work showed us that culture is a terrain of struggle between classes, and has always been so. And the way in which certain philosophies and ideas and political ideologies have been conveyed to the masses of people have generally been through culture rather than anything else. The Italian Renaissance is a great example of the humanist ideas being conveyed to people via culture. The Progressive Writers Association and the music that went with that in the context of Pakistan popularized the ideas not only of Ghalib but also of Faiz Ahmed Faiz and Habib Jalib and so many others. And if we go further back in history in the context of Pakistan, were it not for the Qawwalis and the Sufi saints and the ghazals, etc., you would not have seen the popularization of Islamic ideas in the context of South Asia, specifically through Qawwali. Ghazals, of course, being the choice of love poetry, which was popular with the Mughals, etc. So I think it is, we have copious evidence. Then there was, of course, the anti-apartheid struggle in which music always played a very central role. There's the example of Victor Jara in Chile, whose music played an incredibly important role in the late 1960s, 70s. So one can quote numerous examples where, I mean, it was so important, popular culture was so important that the leader of China, the revolutionary leader of China, Mao Zedong, began a cultural revolution precisely to change culture so that he thought, proletariat culture could be brought about and that would pave the way towards a socialist and proletarian society.
Right.
So I think it's a vital terrain of struggle between different political ideologies.
Right. Mr. Bordenaro, right. Mr. Bordenaro, Dr. Rahman gives us a great insight into the historical role that popular culture has played in influencing culture, shaping societies. Something I want to talk to you about is the stronghold that one country or one culture has on globalized popular culture. Now, for a very long time, popular culture in the global sense was always seen in light of Hollywood, American movies, American narrative dominating that. Do you think that's being challenged now?
Well, today we are experiencing the maximum diffusion of internet. And Google foresees the entire population, that will be 8 billion people in 2022, with access to internet. This means that the audience is the world. Pop culture can, of course, be local, but there's a global pop culture that is going to impact every one of us.
Right. And do you feel like we're seeing more of a diversity in that?
Well, of course, it's not going to be anymore just the American or Anglo-Saxon led trend, but it's the entire world who will contribute to that. And of course, Asia is going to play an enormous role in that. It's a matter of numbers.
Right. Dr. Rahman, do you feel like when we in the global landscape, certain forms of as localized popular culture becoming more globalized, having more global importance, that also reflects that countries, that regions growing importance in the world?
If you look at the history of the world, it's always been the case that the economic powers of any given period have also been the cultural powers of that particular period. The large states and the powerful states, the economically dominant and advanced states, have always managed to export culture. And where they have imported culture, they have, of course, turned it into a commodity or into a form which is serviceable to them. So it's not. I wouldn't want to agree that it's all just a question of numbers. It's a question of economic power. Political scientists have been writing about soft power for a while, and in that context, I think Hollywood plays an enormously influential role in projecting the soft power of the West. And the more that it's able to take little artifacts from Asian culture and other cultures, the more effective it can be in taking its values into those cultures, because it can then take on the appearance of being global, whereas actually it's driven by a handful of corporations. So no, I don't see that the diversity in the context of the world today is necessarily increasing. In fact, I see that popular culture is more and more dominated, sadly, by a handful of corporations. That's what feeds the cultural industry. I would like it to be the case that there's greater diversity of thought and opinion, of origin and source, and and so on. But I don't see that as the case.
But when we're talking about, and you're mentioning dominance here, how does that fundamentally impact identity of a society when there is such a stronghold on popular culture, as you're stating, by certain corporations, by certain groups of people?
So the appearance of diversity exists, whereas in fact the message that's being sent behind that culture becomes quite uniform. In culture, of course, we can talk about culture or art having at least two different aspects. One, of course, is the form that it takes, which is whether you're doing popular music, you're doing classical music, you're doing hip hop, rap. What kind of music are you doing? What kind of painting are you doing? What kind of poetry are you doing, etc. So that's one aspect. But the other aspect, of course, are the values that you are promoting in that on that terrain. And as long as corporations come to dominate the creation of popular culture, which they do, frankly. I mean, honestly, despite the explosion of the internet all across the world, there's a figure that says 90% of people are basically content. They view content. 10%, about 9% of people are the ones that share content, and it's only about 1% of the people on the internet that create content. So it's the content creators that are really calling the shots, and you've got to have money to create content, right? Or to promote content. Some content can be created without money, but that's really he who pays the piper calls the tune. And so the values that are being sent out across popular culture in the last 2 decades, we've seen them being dominated by values of corporate capitalism, neoliberalism, commodification, and so on. Of course, stated in more subtle ways, as artists are able to always do. But those are the values that have come to dominate over popular culture, in my opinion.
Right. Mr. Bordenaro, now we're talking a little about how, popular culture is essential for soft power and how that translates into international relations. Do you feel like more and more countries are now investing in that aspect, their soft power? I mean, we're seeing K-pop emerge, we're seeing different industries emerge. India does this quite well with their industry. Do you feel like more countries are realizing the importance of soft power, especially through films and art, for their diplomatic relations?
I'm not sure about that. These days, I'm talking a lot about this. In general, we call it digital diplomacy. So the projection of the image of a country outside are kind of techniques of nation branding that can be used by a country. I've been talking about that recently, and people still don't understand the importance of that. They consider digital diplomacy more like putting online the public administration. So creating services for the customers and not yet using it as a communication tool for the country. But I'm sure they will understand it very soon. They will understand it very soon.
So the implications of what happens after countries invest in this are still, you're saying, unknown. But why do you think countries are finding it more important to gravitate towards this? I mean, we're seeing it clearly all across the world.
Well, I can tell you again, today, the audience of everyone, this means also a country, its audience is the entire world. And the entire world that can access information. This means that this kind of investments have to be done, needs to be done as soon as possible.
Right.
Every country needs to talk to all the world population.
Right. Dr. Rahman, now you are also an activist and a musician, and you talk about socialist ideas, you talk about various things through your music. Now, a discussion I was having with a guest earlier was about making certain ideas, making certain information more accessible. He was of the view that some parts of popular culture do this in a negative way. It makes, it trivializes matters, it makes things into frivolous things. Do you see that in the same light? Yes,
I think that an argument can be made for that. I mean, where I'm beginning to sound a bit like a stuck record, but where corporate interests dominate, their primary motive is to turn around a profit, right? And so they can very easily appeal to the lowest common denominator, culturally speaking. And so we've seen a lot of, in music, we've seen the original rebellious black nationalist spirit of hip hop being turned into something quite crass, in the instance of certain products that have come out, sort of romanticizing gangsters and romanticizing sexism and romanticizing these sorts of things. We can also see, I mean, you were referring to K-pop earlier, and very few people realize how K-pop emerged, but it also emerged as a consequence of the conflict with North Korea. You see, the North Koreans had a lot of state-supported music because they, being socialists, really thought we should have large music groups, we shall have lots of culture, and we'll promote our musicians, and through that we'll promote our socialist ideology. And so the Koreans also got together, the state and corporations together, because the public-private partnership is quite strong. And they, in fact, invested in creating K-pop, which became massive. So it was not something spontaneously that came up, but it was something quite manufactured by corporations and by the South Korean state as, again, to promote South Korea as a land of freedom and so on and so forth. So, sometimes what we think of as, something quite rather innocent, when we go into its details, we discover that there are always forces, political forces, ideological, class, civilizational, racial, gendered even forces that are pushing these ideas and agendas. Now, there's a big contestation, since I spoke about gender, there's a big contestation within music and within culture about what is, music that would lead to the emancipation of women versus what is music and culture and values and ideas that would lead to reinforcing patriarchy. Feminist struggles have all been looking at, the construction of sexuality within the context of popular culture. But when we look at the construction of sexuality in popular culture, do we find, in fact, that the objectification of women has gone down, or do we find that the stereotyping and objectification of women has gone up? I think the results may not be what feminists desire, or progressives such as myself desire. Right.
Taimur Rahman, now you're asking a lot of questions that, of course, the audience themselves need to ask themselves, and this makes for a very interesting conversation, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you so much, Dr. Taimur Rahman, for joining us from Lahore, and Mr. Valerio Bornaro for joining us from Rome. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We will see you again tomorrow with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.